Alright guys, Mr. Hart here. I just wanted to add some notes to the previous video. There was one congruence postulate or congruence condition that person didn't talk about, and I want you to have that as well. And it is called the HL, or hypotenuse leg congruence condition. Now you may remember that we see a hypotenuse when we're dealing with a right triangle. So if we have a right triangle, which is a triangle with a 90-degree angle, then the hypotenuse is going to be this side. It's going to be the longest side, the side that's across from the 90-degree angle. And then the other two sides are just called legs. And they're both called a leg, and at this point we don't need to differentiate them. So let's say we have one right triangle, and we know that its hypotenuse is however long, and we know that it has a leg that's also however long. And we have a second right triangle with a hypotenuse that's the same length, and that also has a leg that's the same length. These two triangles have to be congruent. So just knowing that we have a right triangle with congruent hypotenuses and one pair of congruent legs is enough to say that the two triangles are congruent. And it doesn't matter which leg it is, it could be either leg. So that's the first thing. So the second thing I want to add is how we can make a statement that says these two triangles are congruent using mathematical notation. And that's called a congruence statement. So let's say the first triangle is called triangle A, B, C. And the second triangle we'll say is H, I, J. What I can say is that triangle, and I just draw a picture of a triangle as our shorthand for that word, A, B, C, is congruent, and the congruent sign is this equal sign with a squiggly line over the top of it. We'll talk more about that later, but for now that's what it looks like. Is congruent to triangle H, I, J. Now, the order of these letters matters. So I just randomly chose to call the first one ABC, and I didn't put those letters in any particular order, but I chose the order of the letters of the second triangle based on how I ordered the first. What I mean is, if we look at angle A in the first triangle, that's the right angle. And so that matches up with angle H in the second triangle because that's also the right angle. So since I put angle A first here, I need to put angle H first there because those two angles match up. They correspond. And then I went from angle A to angle B, which means I went from angle A along this side that we don't have any markings on to get to angle B. So here, if I'm starting at H, I have to go along this side that I also don't have any markings on to get to I. Essentially what we're saying is that I matches up with B. So if B is second here, I needs to be second here. And then we only have one letter left. C is the last letter here, and J is the last letter there. So those two match up. Angle C matches up with angle J. So that's where order matters. Now, in another sense, order doesn't matter because I could have also written triangle BCA is congruent to triangle IJH. This is also a correct statement. I wrote the letters in a different order, but the key thing is the corresponding parts still match up. So B matches up with I, and so I wrote both of those first. And then angle C matches up with angle J, so both of those come second. And then angle A, the right angle, matches up with angle H, the right angle, so those have to come third. So as long as we match up the corresponding parts, that order doesn't matter, okay? But we do have to match up the corresponding parts. So those are the two additional things that you need to know to do the worksheet. And now I just want to look at some examples on the worksheet. All right, so this is what you're going to be working on for the rest of class. If we look at this first section, We have to decide if the triangles are congruent, and then if they are, we need to say why. Do they satisfy the side, side, side condition, the side, angle, side condition, the angle, side, angle condition, the angle, angle, side condition, or the hypotenuse leg condition? So if I look at these first triangles, okay, I have a side here that has 1 hash mark on it, and a side in the second triangle that has 1 hash mark. So those match up, they correspond. Then I have this angle that's labeled with a little circle, and this angle that's labeled with a little circle. And then this side that has 2 hash marks, and this side that has 2 hash marks. So we have corresponding side, angle, side in each triangle. And that is one of our congruence conditions, side, angle, side. So that we can say, yep, these triangles are congruent, and the reason is that they satisfy the side, angle, side condition. Now if we look at another example, let's look at E. So here we have an angle O in both triangles, and then we have a side with 1 hash mark and a side with 1 hash mark, and then a side with another hash mark and a side with another hash mark. So the order of these parts is a little different. Here we're going from an angle to a side, then to another side. So that's ASS. And if we look up here, ASS is not one of our congruence conditions. So that means that we cannot say that those triangles are congruent. When we get down to the second section here, we just add a step. So in addition to saying whether or not the triangles are congruent, we have to name the congruent triangles. So I'm going to do a couple of these for you as well. So if I look at this first pair, all right, in this top triangle I've got one side with a hash mark, 1 hash mark, one side there with 1 hash mark. I've got a right angle there and a right angle there. And then in each triangle I have a side with 2 hash marks. So that's side, angle, side in both triangles. And again, if we go back here, side, angle, side is one of our conditions. So we can say, yes, these are congruent, and the reason is because of side, angle, side. Now, we also have to write our congruent statement. And this is where we have to match up the corresponding parts of the 2 triangles. So this first one, I'm just going to call CDE, and I'm not choosing those letters in any particular order. The second one, though, I have to choose the letters to match up with the ones here. So I started with angle C. So if I look at angle C here, well, angle C comes at the end of the side with 1 hash mark and this longest side. So the corresponding angle in the other triangle is angle H. Also comes at the end of the side with 1 hash mark and this corresponding side. So H looks like it matches up with C. So since I have C first here, I have to write H first here. Then here I went to angle D, which is the right angle. The right angle in this second one is angle A. So D matches up with A, so I have to write A second. And then my last letter is just G, so that's easy to fill in. Last example. Some of these you have to think a little bit about. So you might look at this one and say, well, all we know is that these 2 triangles have 2 angles in common. And angle is not one of our congruence conditions. So that's not enough to say that the triangles are congruent. But you may also notice that both triangles share side AB. So since AB is part of both triangles, that's equal in both triangles. So really what we have here is an angle, and then this side, and then another angle. So these are congruent by angle, side, angle. And I'll leave you to write the congruence statement and to fill out the rest of these. But again, the idea with all of these is first decide whether the 2 triangles are congruent, yes or no. Then if it's yes, what condition do they satisfy? Side, 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 angle, 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 side, or hypotenuse leg. And then write a statement that relates the 2 triangles, matching up the corresponding parts. That's it. There's some folks around to help you today if you need it, and we can certainly answer any questions when I see you next week. Take care.